Several of you during the coffee break, either yesterday or today as we were talking, raised the question of, that is generically raised on the issue of God and the problem of evil, God and the problem of pain. And specifically some of you raised the question of the tsunami and the disaster and so on. It was interesting when I was in Ontario in the earlier part of the year and did 3 universities, McMaster and Guelph and Waterloo. In all of those universities, this question came up. From here, I went on elsewhere and then went to Penn State. That also had a large turnout of about 2,500 faculty and students. Within minutes, the question came up, where was God during the tsunami? How could God, a sovereign, all-loving God, allow this and so on? And I framed my response in the following way, because I think, listen to me carefully now, it defangs the question. It takes the fang out of the question. And it runs in the following manner. I would look at the questioner and say to them, who do you think legitimately asks this question? It is not being asked by the scientific naturalist, because the scientific naturalist has a problem with what happened during the tsunami, seaquake and so on. It is this, that the animals actually did better than the human beings in that disaster. Long before the waves came and covered the land, the animals were aware something was going on, and they actually went to higher ground. Now, in the hierarchy of atheistic macroevolution, if survival is indeed the superior ethic to follow, how come the lower end did better than the higher end and were able to survive, while the higher end didn't know how to do it? So the scientific naturalist is in a quandary here. The philosophical naturalist does not ask the question, because the philosophical naturalist would have to assume a moral framework, which is the very thing he denies by saying this world is a random collocation of atoms. The philosophical naturalist, in assuming a moral point of reference, ends up in a self-defeating proposition, because in a naturalistic framework, there is no moral point of reference. It is only in a theistic framework that you can talk of moral reference and moral law and moral issues and evil issues and so on. So the philosophical naturalist does not raise the question, because he's raising a moral question in an amoral universe. So it becomes self-defeating for him. The Hindu and the Buddhist are not raising the question, because for them it's karma. It was the karma of the people that ended up taking their lives. The Muslim is not asking the question, because it's inshallah. It's the will of Allah. He just brought this disaster about. He's totally sovereign. So the scientific naturalist doesn't raise it, or the philosophical naturalist may not raise it. If the Hindu and the Buddhist does not raise it, and the Muslim does not raise it, who's raising it? Only one who assumes the Judeo-Christian framework. Because only in the Judeo-Christian framework is a moral point of reference and the freedom of a human choice actually a legitimate question. So when I'd say to the questioner, are you raising this because you're operating from the Judeo-Christian framework? There'd be silence. You see, forget the answer. Even the question is delegitimized unless you assume the Judeo-Christian framework. And that's why I believe many times when Jesus was asked a question, he questioned his questioner. Good master, what shall I do to attain eternal life? Jesus would say, why do you call me good? There's none good but God. Are you calling me God? If you're calling me God, are you going to listen to my answer? If you're not calling me God, where do you get good from? That is precisely the reason Jesus questioned his questioners, because it forced the questioner to open up within their own assumptions, and it determined the entry point of the discussion. And as these young men were talking about questioning people with trying to be a success, trying to attain leadership roles, sometimes an awful lot of witness for the gospel is done not merely in answering questions, but in questioning the questioner. When you question the questioner, it opens up the context. And that's when the wineskin is made ready before the new wine is actually poured in.